What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The Celestial Compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Biehl. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Biehl.
Greetings, Earthlings. It's Kathy Biehl of Empowerment Unlimited with yet another episode of Celestial Compass. We're going to talk today about a very interesting variant on astrology called Human Design. But before we get to that, I want to update the forecast for the month of August. The first thing is just to alert you. If you think things have been hectic, then strap in, folks, because it's about to get really, really, really frenzied. Mars, the cosmic first responder, the planet of push, is moving into Gemini on the 20th, and he's going to be there into next year. Long time, about 7 months. And Gemini rules communication, papers, texts, what we think, what goes in and out of our mouths, our gadgets, and how we get around. Mars in that sign is going to really, really whip up the information flow, put a terrific amount of aggressiveness into it. If you play with the tarot, your inspirational image for this is the Knight of Swords, the guy on the horse, just with his sword up, flying through the air, whipping things around. Mars will go retrograde at the end of October, which is why he's spending so much time in that sign. But for now, know that pace is going to get even more nuts than it has been. We'll be multitasking. Plus side of this is that Gemini, in addition to being a trickster and playing games on us, can be very lighthearted, so we might be able to find the humor in a lot of what is going on. As the month goes on, we have the planet of communication, Mercury, moving into an air sign as well, Libra. So this really will facilitate everyone just kind of talking to each other. And since Libra also has to do with contracts, there could be a lot of negotiations and collaborations that come into effect with that. We have a full new moon in Virgo on the 27th, and that will mark a moment of trying to make sense of things and to get grounded and to look at things in our lives in terms of with discernment and what is beneficial and what do we want to clean up, reorganize. So while all this mental activity is going on, there's a new moon in another sign that Mercury rules, also Virgo. And so this brings a level of practicality and, if we're lucky, some grounding in with it. You will find much more about this in my forecasts, which are at OMTimes and also my site, empowermentunlimited.net. And with that, let's talk about the fun stuff. Human design. It is a synthesis of 4 wisdom traditions: the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu Chakra System, Western and Eastern Astrology, and the Jewish Kabbalah, and 2 cutting-edge sciences, quantum physics and the human genome. Our guest today is Janet Hickox, who deals with this, who has a site dedicated to it, and who works with it. She is a gifted teacher, intuitive astrologer, and visionary who uses astrology, human design, and the gene keys to help people live their authentic lives. Through a human design astrology consult, she helps you unlock the key ingredients that make you unique, opening doors to freedom and success. Welcome, Janet.
Wow. Thanks, Kathy. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about this, but first I will ask you for your origin story. How did you come to astrology?
Well, that's a very long story, but I'll try to make it as short as possible. I remembered it. Totally remembered it. One day, this was 20-some years ago, my son brought me home a book that was like left over at a garage sale. And he said, "Oh, here, Mom, I think you'll like this book." Well, it had crystals on the front of it, and I think he thought because I liked stones and crystals, that it was about that. But it turns out it was an astrology book on the planet Chiron written by Barbara Hand Clow.
I know what book that was.
Yeah, exactly. And that book moved around my house. No lie. It showed up on the floor. It would show up on my bed. It would show up on my nightstand until finally one day it showed up on my bed, opened up, and I went, "Okay, I got you. You want me to read this?" And when it did, when I started to read it, something happened. It was like memories just started coming back about astrology. And that's literally when I started doing astrology readings. And then from there, I just began to really explore other forms of astrology. And fast forward to 2012, that was when I was first introduced to human design. And there was just something magical in that chart. And I couldn't put it down. And after that, it was a love affair with both astrology and human design, which led me to gene keys and some of the other work that I also do with Pleiadian astrology, Mayan astrology, etc.
Do you have an elevator pitch explanation for human design?
I don't necessarily have an elevator pitch, but what I could say about human design is that it helps you understand who you are at an energetic level, and who you are at that level drives how you make decisions, the best decisions for you, and how you are meant to be in positive relationships. So the most important relationship, of course, being the one you are in with yourself. So I really find that human design gives us that kind of access in a way that traditional astrology doesn't. So I like them both, but I really want to use human design to help you understand who you are and how to make decisions, because I think in the end, that is what everything comes down to. How do I make a good decision?
So it's extraordinarily Virgo. It's very practical.
Well, I do have a Virgo moon and a Virgo Pluto, so maybe that's why that appeals to me.
Now, so if someone were to start to look at this, they would very quickly see that a lot of what goes on doesn't look like what they're used to. So instead of a chart wheel, there's this graph, basically, of
a body graph, we call it.
A body graph. Okay. And it's got all these weird tubes and lines and colors. And can you describe how the chart is, in a simple way, for those who can't see this, how the chart actually translates into this body graph?
Well, you'll notice on your sheet there are two columns on the left side, and those are, or sometimes they're on one on either side of the body graph. And that's the actual birth information. And what it does is tell us where all of the planets were in terms of the energy centers that are in the body graph. Now, the body graph is made up of 9 energy centers, and they're connected by channels. And at the end of the channels, at each end, are what we call gates. And the gates relate to traits that you might have, personality traits that are kind of traceable even to your DNA, which is why we say there's the connection to the human genome. There are 64 gates in your human design, and you have 64 pairs of codons, or 64 codons in your human and DNA structure. So there's a real coherence there. when the channels are connected by planets at either end, they essentially turn on the energy centers, and the energy centers become colored in. Where you have energy centers that are colored in, we say those centers are defined, but they're places where you are broadcasting your own authentic energy through them, versus the energy centers that might be white. And the white centers are places where we take in the energy from the people around us, so now we have a quantum physics sort of connection. Mm-hmm. And we can sometimes start to behave via what we call conditioning in the white centers, because we're being influenced by the other people around us. And that, of course, can cause misidentification or a sort of misalignment with ourselves, a mistaken identity, if you will, in who we think we really are. So taken into the bigger picture, we look at, where are you authentically expressing yourself, and where are you here to learn to be wise about the energy around you, and that is seen through the white centers. So it's pretty complex, but it really breaks down kind of neatly when I'm doing a reading with somebody, so that they can understand who they are through this particular chart.
And my understanding is that after someone has their energy centers identified, when you see what's going on with your body graph, it breaks down into 5 different personality types, basically?
Correct. Yes, there are 5 personality types. Their names are generator, manifesting generator, and then there are manifestors, projectors, and reflectors. The generator types, both the manifesting generator and the generator, they make up maybe 70 to 72% of the entire population. These are types that have a lot of life force energy or vitality, or sustainable life force is what we usually say. And then the other 3 types are open in the sacral center, which is what gives the generator and manifesting generator their access to energy. And they are the rarer types on the planet, and they have a different way of entering into life because they don't have access to the sustainable life force energy. But unfortunately for them, we live in a generated world, so it's very production-oriented or productive-oriented, willpower kind of oriented. And sometimes then the other 3 types, the manifestor, projector, and reflector, get caught up trying to behave like generators and end up burning themselves out or not finding success in life in the way that they'd hoped they would find it. So when you really find out your type, with that type comes a strategy. And that strategy helps you to make the best decisions for you based on your type. Does that make sense?
Right. And it sounds just briefly like the 3 non-common ones almost are like being a lunar type in a solar world.
Correct, right?
They tend to be a little more...
would be that.
Yeah, a little more gentle about how they go about things, and they're more receptive. Interesting.
Yeah. And of course there's variability in all of the types based on where the planets align and what centers are defined. For example, a generator can have just a connection, let's say, from the sacral to the emotional center and still be considered a generator, but have the other 7 centers opened up and have to live their life differently than someone who has more definition in their chart. So it really gets personalized as we, dig in a little bit closer to who you are at that level. And including, like, every type also, almost every type has an authority. And the authority helps you in determining how to make the best decisions. For example, some people are emotional in their authority, which means they have to get clarity over time before they can make decisions, especially big decisions. Some people are intuitive and they are more spontaneous in their decision making. And some types don't have authority. And the only way that they have of really knowing their truth is either to see themselves reflected in their friends or family or the people around them, Or in the case of a reflector, they're looking for that reflection as well as waiting like 28 days, the cycle of the moon, in order to make the best decisions for them. And these are the big decisions, not like, should I go out to eat with a friend kind of decision, but like, should I move or should I change jobs? Those kinds of, should I get married? Should I divorce? Those are big life decisions, things that we need to use our strategy and our authority for.
So this all sounds to me like it's extremely core programming that you got at birth, essentially, and it's not working with progressions or transits or things that other people are, usually look at astrology for. It's pretty much what you came in with.
Yeah, we're looking at what you came in with, but we can also progress that chart. We can also look at the transits, like what transiting planets are coming in that are, like opening up your identity center, let's say, if you had it open, or if, another planet is moving out of something that had been defined, and how is that going to impact you? So we can do all of that, but the first step is always the initial, who am I, through my human design. And in the beginning, right, there are these design crystals. You have a design crystal that represents your soul's purpose, and then you have a crystal that represents your life purpose, and they come together at your birth to create who you are. So what we're really seeing is sort of a map, like we do in astrology. We see a map, only it's a different kind, of who you are and what you're here to do. What are your gifts and what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How are you meant to be living in a world doing what you want to do and find success doing it?
Which is a perfect place for our first break. Hang on, everybody. We'll be back very shortly.
The cutting edge of conscious radio. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Want help with your own celestial compass? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, for Astro Insight forecasts for each week, month, and new and full moon. Want to explore the personal impact? Make a decision? Understand another person? It is possible. Click the Services tab to book a personal session with me. That address again, empowermentunlimited.net.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing a job
and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We are talking with Janet Hickox about human design, which is a fascinating and unique system that for understanding your astrological wiring. So we were just talking about the body graph and different and what it shows about the energy channels in your body or your being and different personality types, and how those lead to differing strategies that you might use to actually make things happen in your life. Would you care to talk just a little bit about the 5 different types? People might be interested in trying to see what feels like what they are. And by the way, you can get your chart from Janet's site, everybody. We will give you the address for that at the end of this.
Right. You can get your chart as well. It comes with a report, maybe 8 or 9 pages that kind of describe who you are. And the reaction I get from people quite frequently on that is, wow, I can't believe in just that you summed up who I am. So that's how I really came to understand this impacts people in positive ways, even if you just get the report and see the body graph or see, the birth chart. Now, you asked the question about the different types, and that's the most important thing for you to know about yourself. And so you might be able to see yourself in some of the things that we'll talk about next. For example, the generators. I'm a generator. Generators are distinguished by having access to sustainable life force energy. And they are also here with a strategy to respond to things that show up in their outer world. So when they're trying to make a decision, they have to wait long enough for something to show up in the outer world, not act from inspiration or ideas or meditation or intuition specifically in the moment. So they're waiting for something in the outer world. When they have that sort of omen or sign, and literally, almost anything can be something to respond to in the outer world, an email, a song on the radio, a conversation you overhear. Those kinds of things can help you really choose to make the decision that's right for you. Now, manifesting generators are very similar to generators, and you happen to be a manifesting generator, Kathy.
Right.
And manifesting generators, they have a sort of hybrid of the energies between the generator and the manifester. So you still need to wait to respond when you're making decisions to something that shows up outside of you. But while you're waiting for that to happen, you can be envisioning how the project or how the home is going to look, or whatever it is that you're, in the process of making a decision on. And using all of your senses, right? Your visionary senses. What's it going to sound like? What's it going to taste like? What's it going to feel like? Who's going to be there with you? So you're sort of setting up the visionary field while you're waiting for something in the outer world. But manifesting generators differ from pure generators because you are multitasking individuals. And you're designed to move quickly. You're designed to skip steps if necessary, where the generators have to be much more step by step in their progress towards something. Manifesting generators, I always think of them as like the hare in the tortoise and the hare fable, where they can jump out and then only have to go backwards if for something, for some reason it shows up in their outer world that they needed to do that. So they need to practice patience, right? Patience is the key for manifesting generators. Now, manifestors, this is funny because when I first studied human design, I was just certain I was a manifester. Everybody wants to be a manifester, but literally they only make up about 8% of the population. They are the pure creator beings, and they move directly from idea or inspiration to the actual building of that idea or inspiration in the outer world. So they're very creative, and yet they also have a bit of a wild side to them that other people pick up on that makes other people want to try to control them, and that can really anger manifestors. So they need to learn in their strategy to inform people who will be affected by their decisions before they actually make them, because that then sets the tone for them to be able to go on. They're not looking for permission. They're just saying, hey, you know what? I'm going on vacation next week. I won't be here to take your calls, just letting you know, right? That's what a manifestor is here to do, to be their creative self. Then we have the projectors. Now, projectors make up about 22 to 23% of the population, and they are our leaders or orchestrators, if you will. They're here to lead, guide, and manage the other types, especially the generator types. And they enter into the most auspicious opportunities when they wait for an invitation to do so. So they're slowed down a little bit more by waiting for the invitation. Now, the invitation can be literal, like, I invite you to join me on this radio show and we're going to talk about human design. Mm-hmm. Or they can, catch a glance from somebody across the room, or they can enter into things sometimes by asking questions, but they need to be careful because they don't have access, like the manifestors didn't either, have access to sacral energy, which gives them sustainable life force. They have to be able to do things and then not do things, right? Rest in between, or else they can tend toward burnout. And then the reflectors are the rarest type, less than 1% of the population. They are the type that has all of the centers open. If you looked at their chart, the whole chart would be white with the exception of some of the gates and so forth that would be in the chart defined only halfway across. And they are here, they're the most loving beings, right? They're the truest reflection of the best of all of us. And when a reflector is in your midst, if they're not showing the health of you as an individual or as a group, then there's something going wrong in the group, because the reflectors are meant to be loving, compassionate, generous beings. And yet when it comes to making big decisions for them, they have to wait the full cycle of the moon, because the only way that they have of seeing their truth is through the reflection of the people around them and or the transiting planets that light up their chart as they move through, especially the moon, which moves 2 to 3 gates in a day. So that gives you kind of the bones of the types. And
I'm really curious here, trying to think of who I know who might be a reflector, and I'm just coming up short. That's fascinating. Now I'm going to...
Sandra Bullock, as an actress. The actress Sandra Bullock, she is a projector, she is a reflector.
Huh.
Yeah. And, it's not like they can't have successes in their lives, right? They can't.
Right.
But they do have to take care in surrounding themselves with people that they love and trust, because they're going to see themselves reflected back to them through those people. And now, in fact, you know what, Kathy? You have a bit of that going on in your own chart. Right? You have an open identity center. It's in your chart, it's the white diamond in the middle. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When that center is open, you don't quite know who you are in the world. So again, you have to make sure that you have really good people that you love and trust around you, so that you can see who you are, because that's the center for lovability, self-worth, and direction. So it's important for you to surround yourself by loving, generous, kind people, so that you can be your most loving, generous, kind person.
Doesn't that sound like a 12th house sun, not being able to see who you are? Interesting.
I have a 12th house sun. I know that one.
You know that one? Yeah, well. That's... Now, you've used the term gate many times. Mm-hmm. Can you clarify that just a bit? Are those where the connections to the I Ching come?
Yes, in a way. The gates are the numbered areas that are within the energy centers in the body graph. And they do reflect the 64 I Ching hexagrams. They reflect the 64 codons. And there's a real coherence here, in the systems when we pick this up. And we understand that these are traits that we all have. We all have all of the human design. But it is set up differently from person to person. So the traits have a way of either being expressed as an authentic aspect of who you are, or being expressed when you're around other people, perhaps. So the gates hold the traits, and those are related to the I Ching, but also related to the codons on the DNA, in the DNA.
In the DNA. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned that each personality type has a specific strategy. Could you go a little more into that?
Right. And the strategy was what I was talking about, say, for the generator, where they have to wait to respond to something in their outer world that matches maybe an idea or inspiration or inkling that they had about something they wanted to do. So their strategy is to wait to respond. The manifesting generator, you, my friend, are also waiting to respond. And in the process, you're envisioning, you're maybe reprocessing the vision, and then you have to inform who will be impacted by your decisions before you make them. So you have sort of a multi-tiered kind of strategy, but it begins with waiting to respond to something that shows up in the outer world. You're not acting directly from idea.
Well, that is not at all how I have lived my life, so that's fascinating. Okay, go ahead. That would explain a lot. Like, okay. I just interrupted. So anyway, so you were also then the
manifester. Now, the manifester strategy is technically informing before they act, because they're creator beings. They're pure creators. So they tend to get irritated when they have to wait for someone else, or when somebody, attempts to block them. So informing before they take action stops that process for them, or at least they can say, look, I told you I was going to be gone for 10 days, and, I let you know that before I left. So the manifestors really need to inform before they take action so that they can avoid becoming angry themselves, or having other people trying to interfere with what it is that they're trying to do. Projectors need to wait for the invitation into the big things in life. Marriage, right? Big one. Wait for the person to ask you to marry them. Moving, right? If they are going to move, they need to wait for something in the outer world that's going to act as an invitation. Maybe it's a job that invites them to move to a new location, etc. And then the reflector types are the ones that need to wait the 28 days or 28 and a half days
for the moon
cycle of the moon, right, to be able to see clearly what it is that their next steps are. And that's for the big things, again, in life, not the little things.
Right. So if someone gets their chart and starts to understand it and reads your report, there's a wonderful follow-up PDF with explaining the three keys that people get after the initial report. Then they can have a general reading, and what would they expect? Like if you meet with someone and say, okay, now we're going to really talk about this, I imagine you then go into depth about all this. Do you talk about how they've experienced life and how this is played out? Or do they go, like I just did and said, that's not at all how I have made my decisions?
I get a lot of that. But I also get a lot of people that say things like, I used to do that when I was a kid. When I was younger, I did that. I did things that way, but they got out of the habit, right? Conditioning kicks in from the bigger, wider world. The bigger, wider world tells us that we need to use our minds to make decisions. There isn't one person on the planet designed to make decisions from their minds, but almost all of us believe that our minds are involved in decision making, but it isn't. The body holds the wisdom for making key decisions. So that's the first big aha that people get. And then, of course, their type we're going to go more into how is their type. They're going to give me situations in their life quite often about what's going on, where their challenges are, what seems to be a repeating pattern in their life. And then I'm going to tailor my discussion for them based on what they're telling me. And then I love to look at people in their charts, what the channels are that are defined, where the gates are connecting from one end to the other end of the channel. And I tend to call them their superpowers. And these are places where their authenticity is really bang on, and talking to them about that so that they really understand their strengths And then we have a discussion about the places where you might misidentify yourself as something else or as somebody else, because that's something that happens a lot. It happens frequently with all of us, that we believed we're something that we're not. And then we finish up typically with questions and a discussion often about Chiron, the wound, and where they are in their life cycle, and how that can further be defined through human design as different from astrology.
So Chiron actually shows up in the body graph, because I'm looking at mine trying to see where it might be, and the charts that I use that give you the report don't show Chiron. But I have another program that gives me Chiron, and I also have a book that I can look it up. So I'm going to look yours up real quickly since I'm sitting here looking at the book. And I know the astrological degree, but that's okay. You can see where it is in the graph.
Yeah, I just want to see what date it was at. You were born on the 27th, 19. Okay, so let's look at that. And so this is interesting. Your Chiron sits at the gate 41, which in your chart is already defined by the sun. So the sun you must have a sun conjunct Chiron, perhaps, or very close to conjunction in your chart.
Yeah, they're like less than a degree away.
Yeah, so that's information that I can get from that. And the gate 41 is called the gate of imagination. And its issue, if I can find an issue with it, I mean, because who doesn't love imagination, is the necessity of bringing the imagination down into the physical world and creating what it is that you can envision. So the wound for you around that might be demonstrated with, great ideas, but not being able to get them off the ground.
And there is my life and time for a break. So we'll come back to this in just a minute.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
How would you like navigational tools you can use on your own? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, and click the Shop tab. There you'll find lots of talks and guides explaining the big influences at work now, like Saturn in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus. You'll also find a variety of guided visualizations for relaxing, clearing your energy, or getting to know planetary archetypes. That address again, empowermentunlimited.net.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We're talking about human design with Janet Hickox, who was just nailing me right before the break, discussing how Chiron in the imagination gate might possibly have played itself out in my life. quite accurately, I would have to say. And again, that sounds like it's another way of saying, I always believe if a chart says something once, it says it 4 or 5 times if it's important.
Right.
And this again sounds like a Pisces ascendant, a 12th house sun, all of that. Okay. Chiron at the gate of imagination.
It's interesting because, and that gate in Human Design happens to be the gate of the Human Design New Year, which doesn't fall on January 1st. Much like the new year for astrology is really when the sun gets to 0 Aries. We have January 22nd when the sun moves into the gate 41, the gate of imagination. That kicks off the Human Design year. So it really tells you a lot about the system, where it's all about, we have these ideas, we have these creative urges, and now how am I best designed to bring forth that energy into the world, to birth it, if you will, in the right way for me, which is going to be different from me to you to the next person and on.
Now, I see, looking at this chart, as subparts of the type, strategy is listed, but there's also something called the conditioning theme. Is this something that happens to you when you're young that then leads to a certain way of being in the world? Would that be a conditioning theme?
Yeah, a conditioning theme is typically something that you will experience when you're not living your type, strategy, and authority. So if you're, say, pushing yourself, leaping out of things or leaping into things without wading through your strategy, which is to respond to what's showing up in your outer world, you might start feeling frustration, or you might start feeling anger because you're a hybrid type. You can have both. If people stand in your way when you're trying to create something, that's going to trigger some anger. So those are signposts that will tell you how closely you are aligned with your authentic self or not. So, and it can be used in other ways. For example, frustration for a generator can also tell them that they are about ready to jump off of what we call the plateau, where there's this energy of integration that happens in response to all the growth that they've been experiencing. And that might affect the manifesting generator as well. And that frustration, like, I don't know what's going on. Why did my business slow down? Or why are things, feeling like they're not going anywhere, leads to frustration. But that's your key, that something is about to shift, right? That energy. So they're kind of like tells, right? That it's not that you're doomed to be frustrated or doomed to be angry or bitter if you're a projector, or disappointed if you're a reflector. It's telling you something about how well you are aligned with your own authentic self. Again,
very useful Virgo type information. You can do something with this. This isn't just, isn't this fascinating? But, okay, it's a navigational tool. Fascinating. Now, I notice on this overview that there's also a category that says profile. What is... Because mine is a really interesting one.
Yeah.
What would a profile be?
Forget the words that you see on the chart. What is yours? A heretical hermit. Okay.
Yeah.
They're weird words, but essentially the profile is the role that you're here to play on the planet. So if you think of life on planet Earth as sort of a play, right, or a production, and all of us human beings are characters in that play or production, then the role that you're here to play is characterized by the profile. And in your case, it's the heretical hermit. So you're really here to be sort of a way shower for people. And sometimes you get blamed for the way that you're showing. Sometimes people look to you to be the savior. Other times people might think of you as the general, yes, ma'am. But you kind of stand as the karmic mirror for people. And it's not your job to make life better for people, but other people may either blame you if it doesn't work out well for them, or they may follow you and then say, oh, hey, you led me down this wrong road when you never had any part in it. But the other part of you is the hermit, which is someone who is going their own way, loving life, loving what they're doing, and happy to be doing it alone even. And then life will suddenly call them out, call them into something. It's like I'm I'm doing my, creative thing, and suddenly the phone rings and someone wants a reading, right? And now I'm scheduling a reading. So the hermit needs time to recharge their batteries, kind of thing, like withdrawing time, relaxation time. But then the world will work in such a way that you don't get to sit there in doing nothing for very long, right? You'll get called back out. And that is how you support yourself, basically, right? Taking the time for yourself to recharge those batteries so that then you can be sort of the person that stands as the karmic mirror for other people. And it's interesting that fifth line, we call it a fifth line profile, because those are lines that are related to the I Ching. Each one of those numbers, just 1 through 6, they are related to I Ching. And in the I Ching, the fifth line profile is kind of the seduction line, if you will. Sometimes I think of them as the Casanovas, right? You can talk anybody into anything, but you also have to take the responsibility for what you're talking them into. But then you also show them that they have their own responsibility in it based on, their own decision-making processes. So people follow you, right? They're going to follow your suggestions. And that's important for you to remember. So if you're leading them into, positive, higher thinking, think for yourself, find your own, way, that's great. But if you lead them somewhere else, I think sometimes like cult leaders, where they're like, follow me and then drink the Kool-Aid, right? Not that you're like that. That's not what I mean. But
no, I get it.
The negative, the negative part of that is that sometimes the fifth lines lead people in a not so positive direction. So that's pretty much, you've got a lot of fives. Now that I look at your chart, you have a lot of the fifth line energy. There's leadership in that. But I want to talk about that for a second, because it's not like you deliberately head out to become a leader. People just kind of watch you, right? If there were a big earthquake today or a fire or a flood and you head for the hills, people are going to watch you and they're going to follow you. Mm-hmm. It's not that you said, hey, follow me. They just follow you. Mm-hmm. So you have this sort of leadership quality, but it's not because you said, hey, I'm the leader, follow me. It's because of your energy signature. People tend to watch you and see what you're doing. And so you might even be setting trends for people that you didn't even realize you were setting.
Well, they come up with it 15 years later, but that's okay.
It doesn't matter. Time has no meaning here.
No, well, that's apparently. So thank you very much. And to talk more about what someone can do after they work with you, you have all kinds of ways you can take this information and focus it on very specific areas of life. Someone can look at their own health using this.
Yep. Health, their relationships, and money and abundance. They can look at their life purpose and what I call their story, the story of their life. They can look at their spiritual quest. Who am I here, to be as a spirit, and career and profession. So we can, dial in the lens that they want to look at themselves to find more deeper information about who they are.
Do you have any stories you can share about realizations that people had, or ways that their lives went in a different direction once they had this information?
Oh, absolutely. So there was a woman one time, she was a manifester. And the first thing she did when I started talking to her about being a manifester, she started bawling, because all manifestors, they're pure creator beings, which means that sometimes they don't follow through. Like they're initiators. They start things. They don't necessarily finish things. And all of her life, including her family, they would say she was a flake. They would tell her she was scattered, right? That she needed to focus, that she needed to stick with something. And that isn't who she was meant to be. So the moment I told her that, she just busted out crying, because she knew all along that she was doing things the correct way, but everybody around her was telling her there was something wrong with her because she would jump from one thing to another. She wouldn't finish things. And I said, no, sweetie, you will finish the most important things, but other things, you can let them go. You pass them on to other people. They finish them. So there's that story. And then I've had, lots of people who, especially generator types, who were always quitting too soon or jumping out of one thing and into the other thing, not doing it based on ideas, that it was impacting their money life, it was impacting their credibility, it was impacting their integrity. And as soon as you let them know that you're not designed to leap into and out of things based on what you're thinking about, it restores their life to a correct order, and they're able then to make decisions that have positive impacts in their life instead of just doing what they seem to think they need to do in the moment. And I've got stories like that of projectors who are burning themselves out, constantly trying to compete in a world that's mostly generated, and wondering why it is they can't keep up, thinking that there's something wrong with them. When there's nothing wrong with them, they're just designed to do things a different way, right? They're not designed to be working that 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 job day in and day out. So once I'm able to let them know that, they can change their life and they can restore their health even at times, because most of the time they're working with autoimmune diseases or fatigue or anxiety, burning out, trying to keep up with everybody else. And it's not who they're meant to be.
And yet it doesn't necessarily mean that they're weak people, because
not at
the
all.
projector that I know holds an extraordinarily powerful position and has one of the most iron wills I have ever run into in my life.
There is a rare type of projector that has the will center defined, and that becomes their power or their authority. So that may be who she is. But projectors are leaders. They're guides. They make the best counselors or coaches because they really tap into something about who you are at soul level. That's why we say they're here to lead, guide, and manage the generators and the manifesting generators, because they know people. They know you, right? At soul level, they know you. And they are here to show you the way, but not necessarily by doing the work themselves. So when they're trying to, do all the work, they're trying to be more like the manifesting generators or generators around them, but that will eventually burn them out. But they are wise beings, very spiritual. And when they get opened up to their own personal path of energy, they can accomplish more than generators can in terms of, projects done, opportunities taken advantage of, etc. So they are powerful.
That is fascinating.
Definitely.
Well, I would say that for this person. Fascinating. So for people who have been listening to this and going, wow, how can someone who's just stumbled onto this find out more information? I mean, one way is to go to your site, which is living-astrology.com. But are there books? Are there things they can...
Yeah, there are several really good books. My teacher was Karen Curry Parker, and her book, in the very beginning, she was the only book that I knew of at the time, and it was Understanding Human Design, and by Karen Parker, or Karen Curry Parker is the more current name she's using. But one of my favorite books to give people a link to now is called Human Design, Discover the Person You Were Born to Be, by Ketan Parkin. And that's spelled C-H-E, T as in Tom, A-N, and the last name is Parkin, P-A-R-K-Y-N. I just found that book, for the average Joe who doesn't know much about astrology or human design, to be so easy to understand. So I really like that book. So that gives people two different things. But if you want to know more personally about yourself, go to the website. There's a place there for free. Get your free human design chart and report. And then if you want to personalize it even more, get a reading. That having a personal session is the best way. As you know, astrology is definitely complex, right? And trying to understand it because you know you're a Gemini is silly, right? You've got to, there's more to you than that kind of thing. So.
Right. Well, thank you so much for explaining all of this. Your website again is?
living-astrology.com.
And you have a Facebook page that is Living Astrology, just together, those two words mushed up together,
Living
correct?
Astrology. It's also my YouTube channel is Living Astrology. And I do a broadcast every Monday and Friday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific time. We talk about astrology and human design and whatever else it is that Spirit deems necessary for you to find out about.
Is that on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, those are live broadcasts to YouTube and to Facebook. So you can catch up all the episodes by going to Facebook.
Well, thank you so much for explaining this to us all. And thanks, everybody, for listening. And again, you can find me at empowermentunlimited.net. Talk to you again in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.